Let's talk about maybe the most important issue of them all, the potential for almost global conflict. Now, as you know, since last Friday, when Israel launched that incredible precision attack on Iran, taking out their nuclear facilities, killing their nuclear scientists, military leaders. Israel and Iran have been swapping missiles, pounding each other every night. Israel believing, Netanyahu believing, that the mad mullah's tyrannical regime in Iran may be on the point of collapsing, that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who's been in power since 1989, he's 86 years old, may be on the brink. It might all nearly be over for him and his regime. That's why Israel are pounding Iran right now, and that's why Donald Trump may commit America to joining the assault on Iran, to overthrow the most dangerous regime on the face of the earth. They've already neutralized it, hopefully, in terms of nuclear power, but they've got a lot of weapons. So what's happening now? Where are we heading? What kind of peril are we in? Let's talk to a defense analyst, Colonel Simon Diggins. Simon, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Let's have a look at Donald Trump. I mean, he's speaking in riddles and rhymes as usual. Let's have a quick look at what the president's up to right now.
Will you strike the Iranian nuclear component? And what time exactly, sir? Sir, would you strike it? Would you please inform us so we can be there and watch? I mean, you don't know that I'm going to even do it. You don't know. I may do it. I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do. I can tell you this, that Iran's got a lot of trouble, and they want to negotiate. And I said, why didn't you negotiate with me before? All this death and destruction. Why didn't you negotiate? I said to the people, why didn't you negotiate with me 2 weeks ago? You could have done fine. You would have had a country. It's very sad to watch this. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. It's so, everyone thought it was going to be the reverse. I didn't think so. And I was telling them, you gotta do something. You gotta negotiate.
Well, Simon, subsequent to that rather strange outburst, the president has said that a diplomatic solution could still be found. A deal could still be struck. Where do you think we are in terms of the possibility of America joining Israel in this assault on Iran? The reason I think it's possible is this, that Netanyahu senses the Iranian regime is on the brink, that it's a lot weaker than anybody thought, and it might collapse. 70% of Iranians don't like
You've frozen on me, mate.
Yeah, don't like the Ayatollah too much. Now, Donald Trump loves to be on the winning side. If he senses that Netanyahu's right, then perhaps he might join in. What's your thoughts on that? Yeah.
There is every possibility he'll do that. There is a conversation, there's a discussion that the idea that there'd be a meeting on Sunday and then the attack on Friday was kind of good cop, bad cop routine between Netanyahu and President Trump. But I think where we are now is that it's moved down. There's been a massive reinforcement of American forces into the region, giving him, we believe, the capability to strike those bits of the Iranian regime that even the Israelis can't get to at the moment. And so he is ramping the pressure on Iran. And I believe at some point he will either have to do it or not. You can't sit there forever with this. I don't think the Iranians, they'll be sensible, are actually going to give in. I think they're going to sit there and be attacked. I think one of the problems we've got as a regime like that, how closed they are. They're a very closed regime. They are very self-referencing, so they've got their own view of the world. And things that fit that world, they believe. Things that might be outside that worldview, they don't believe. And I think one of the problems they're going to come up against is just not believing that Donald Trump might actually attack them. And that, I think, could be fatal.
But in terms of Donald and, of course, Israel, my understanding of the situation is this, that Ayatollah Khamenei, who's been in power since 1989, he's 86 years old, he knows that politically he's quite weak in Iran. I think we've proved over the last few days that I suspect that Iran is almost militarily weaker than the world thought, although it's got quite a store of missiles. Let's not dismiss them out of hand yet. But the Iranians, Khamenei and the rest of them, the mad mullahs, they're in an existential battle for survival. And if they don't throw everything at this, they realise they'll be destroyed. Now, there's nothing more dangerous than a cornered rat, and this lot are cornered rats, aren't they?
They are, but they're cornered rats have had quite a lot of teeth removed. I mean, the Israeli operations last year, particularly the October operations, when they took out a very large portion of Iran's air defences, has basically kind of created a military gap into which the current attack can take place. But it's whether they recognise it. I mean, whether they kind of recognise Saddam right up to the very last moment. You'll remember Comical Ali in 2003 were convinced that they were going to launch death and devastation upon the attacking forces. And I think they just might believe that that's actually the case. But they are actually militarily much weaker. But it's whether Donald Trump is prepared to live with the consequences, not simply of sort of defanging the current Iranian regime, which I think would be reasonably possible and could be possible. But what happens then if that regime completely collapses? And how are we going to deal with the consequences of that? And I think that is a thing that's really stopping him at the moment. That and the pressure from some of his Republican supporters that he said, and that's part of his election promise, he would not get America involved again in another forever war. I think that's where the concern is at the moment. We can defang the theocratic regime that's in the terrorist regime, but actually what do we do if that regime collapses? Who's going to take their place? And how are we going to deal with the consequences of the operation?
So, in other words, they'll be making comparisons with the fall of Iraq and the capturing of Saddam Hussein back then, and everybody, oh, that's brilliant, we've beaten the Iraqis, we've executed Saddam Hussein, it's brilliant, it's fantastic. And then what happened? We were left with this kind of mosaic of chaos, the ramifications of which continue to this very day. So I assume that the geopolitical reality of the Iran situation is just that. If we kill Khamenei, as has been threatened, if we get rid of him, if we get rid of the mad mullahs and we destroy the Iranian tyrannical regime, what happens then?
Well, and this is where we are struggling to find out what the future might be. Prior to the Iraq invasion, there had been effectively the Iraq invasion take place over almost over a decade. So you have the Iran-Iraq war, you have the war in 1991, the Gulf War, followed by the 2003 operation. But in the intermediate period, there was a very strong effort made by the US particularly, but also allies, to understand what was going on inside Iraq. A similar effort has not had the opportunity to take place here inside Iran. So whether or not there are people we can talk to who can actually start to put the country back together again in a different direction, I think is one of the big questions that sits there. But against all the risks that we sit with, and you quite rightly outlined that all those risks are being dragged into a conflict which we don't know where the outcome will be, there is another problem, which is this. If we leave the current Iranian regime half defeated, which is basically where they are at the moment, there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that they will, as quickly as they possibly can, try and develop and acquire a nuclear weapon. And of course, they've got their friends. They've got their friends in the famous CRINC, the China, Russia, the North Korea group, Iran and North Korea. And they have got nuclear weapons. They might say, this is the missing bit of technology you need, and we can then help to put it in place. So the other dilemma is actually, do we need to actually defeat them completely, take all those risks, because the alternative is a nuclear-armed Iran. And I personally think that's the bigger risk. The opportunity, therefore, created for us is to continue this attack and accept the consequences, because the alternative is frankly disastrous.
There are reports right now, Richard, and doubtless we don't know exactly what's going on right now, but I think we can probably assume that, as has happened ever since last Friday, both countries will be exchanging missile fire at each other with fatal consequences. But there's a report here saying that an Iranian government jet has fled to Oman. And Iran, meanwhile, has been plunged into an internet blackout. and that Trump is weighing up his options. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer is chairing a Cobra meeting. I think we can forget all about the importance of that because we're not in the circle of intelligence anymore due to our palpable anti-Israel tendencies, or this government's tendencies. So never mind about Cobra. But this Iranian government jet fleeing to Oman, do you think that the Ayatollah might be on board?
It could well be that. I mean, one of the things he said earlier on today, he put out a tweet, which I don't normally follow him, I can assure you, Kevin, but I was following him today. And about 2 o'clock this afternoon, he said that there would be a surprise tonight. That will be the surprise of centuries. Those are pretty much his exact words. Now, I think at the time, most people read that as a bit of kind of bloodthirsty war rhetoric from there. But perhaps the surprise would be that he flees and tries to establish a kind of peace settlement or some kind of peace agreement by going to the Oman. And the Oman's always had a very interesting relationship with Iran because of its geographical proximity to it. They've managed to keep lines of communication open with the Iranian regime, regardless of their otherwise distaste for what they do there. So it could well be that's what's going on at the moment. There's a sort of a delegation of Iranians flying to the Oman, which is a friendly country as far as we're concerned, the Americans, to try and talk to Americans about what a surrender might actually look like, rather than have the might and majesty of the US Air Force descending upon them.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that could explain why suddenly, after his weird statements about nobody knows what I'm going to do, I might not, and all that kind of stuff. Subsequent to that, he said, he literally made a point of coming out with a statement saying a diplomatic solution, a deal could still happen. And that may be linked with this jet that's flown into Oman. So maybe talks are going on, or will be going on pretty damn soon. To go back to your point about what happens next in Iran, Netanyahu's calculation has always seemed to have been this, and he made this clear in a speech last week. Yes, he wants to take out their nuclear potential, their capacity. Yes, he wants to take out their military leaders and their nuclear scientists, but he also said that he wanted to cause regime change there. He's working on the principle, as I said earlier, that 70% of Iranians are sick to death of this regime, this tyrannical, mad mullah regime, and if Israel sort of destroys the infrastructure, destroys the Ayatollah and his mullah mates, that the people will sort of spontaneously rise up and form a new government, a new free government. Now, that's a nice idea, but there are a lot of ifs in that, aren't there?
There are, and I think it's an optimistic outcome. A former Israeli Prime Minister, Ehud Barak, said that it would be a wonderful outcome, but an unlikely one. I think what is more likely is that the agreement will be something like a sort of let's call it a sort of Iran with its nuclear weapons positively removed, but no substantial regime change just yet. But the credibility, of course, of that Iranian regime has now been even more sort of shot away. But their response could well be to launch even more repression. You'll recall that one of the Saddam regime in Iraq became even more oppressive after the 1991 Gulf conflict than it was before, and that's when a lot of the refugees who eventually became the leader of the new Iraq fled the country. So it's an unstable, and we're looking at a potentially unstable period from Iran, almost regardless of what the military situation is.
Interesting what Russia said today, which wasn't a kind of hellfire warning to America. If you bomb Iran, we'll bomb you. It wasn't like if you do this, you're starting World War III. What Russia said was, you mustn't do this, Donald, or President Trump, because if you take out Iran, if you join Israel and you destroy Iran, you will cause great instability in the region. So it was a kind of muted warning, which wouldn't prevent Donald Trump actually bombing Iran if he wanted to, I don't think. But that taken on board, that if Trump wants to, he probably can join Israel with these bombing attacks. Where do you see, I'm going to put you on the spot there, Where do you see this all heading in the next day, 2 days, 3 days? We've just discussed one possibility. That jet's got the Ayatollah and a couple of his mullah mates on board, and they're going to Oman, where maybe they meet Americans and Israelis and work something out. If that is the case, they must be prepared to accept total surrender, because I don't think there's going to be any other solution to that. So that's one possibility. So suppose, though, Simon, what we're talking, that's pure speculation, and it's just a red herring, so that jet doesn't mean anything. If it's that, what do you see happening today, tomorrow, in the next 2 or 3 days?
So I mean, so let's assume that, yes, there's that one possibility. There's a surrender. I think it's a more likely possibility is that the talks fail, because the Iranians really have no sense of what they're actually up against properly in terms of the determination of the Americans. In which case, they'll do something stupid. Somebody in Iran will do something stupid, and the Americans will react. And I think they might react very quickly. There's never a perfect time to launch a military operation, but once they've got sufficient forces in place to do what they need to do, which in this case will mean absolutely crippling Iran's ability to develop more nuclear weapons and probably some direct attacks on the leadership. I think that's what we may end up with, possibly in very short order. I
need to ask you this last question. When you say someone in Iran will do something very stupid, what exactly do you mean?
They'll do something very stupid. Well, exactly. I mean, we talk about normality, we talk about instability in the region. That's the Russians. I mean, we've had instability in the region for a long period of time, most of which is emanated out of Iran. What I mean in this particular instance, though, is some fanatic in the regime attacks an American asset or American ship or American person. And they'll do that because they're convinced that this is their way to martyrdom, and they'll do that, and then the Americans will just react very, very forcefully with all the force they have at their available to their fingertips.
So I suppose this is the last question, really. I suppose that in Iran, what we're talking about is there are those fanatics who, as I say, I think will view this as existential. We're in a fight to the death, and if we die, so be it, we are martyrs. Others, there are sensible mullahs, there are sensible governors in Iran who will say, well, actually, we don't want to die. Yeah. So they will be the negotiators. So our hope would be that the sensible ones prevail.
I hope so as well. I mean, I think the one thing that really particularly saddens me about what we've seen with Iran over the last 40 years, this is a great civilization. The Persian people, their poetry, their culture, their history. This is a great world civilization that's been overlaid by this kind of poisonous perversion of Islam. And the net result of that is we've got instability across the Middle East. Let's find a way for the Iranian people to find their place in the sun again that does not require them to be destabilizing countries around the region or trying to eliminate Israel. Let's find a way for it, but it won't happen as long as you've got this veneer of this brutal, repressive, theocratic regime lying over the top of them.
Well, one thing we can agree on, we agree on everything anyway, but generally we can agree on everything. This is a tinderbox situation, and we're on the edge of something. Simon, excellent to talk to you as always. Simon Diggins there, defence analyst. What do you think's going to happen there? Let me know. 03444991000. I mean, it's a dangerous situation, but it's also fascinating. Let me know what you think.